done both
Part of the
jobs.
team.
Part of the team, I've done both jobs.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
I'd rather be early than late.
It's a little warm in here. Or is it just because it's cooler outside?
I don't know. Well, I wasn't sure what
Okay, welcome to Wilton Library. I'm Andrea Sato, and I work on adult programs here with Michael Bellacosa and Karen Freeman Quinn. We're pleased to co-sponsor this event tonight with the Wilton League of Women Voters and Good Morning Wilton. Tonight we'll hear from candidates running for positions on Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance. And with that, I'm done. I will turn the program over to Louise Shames with the League to introduce tonight's moderator. Thank you.
We are fortunate to have Kay Maxwell return to Wilton to be our moderator. Kay was a previous executive director of World Affairs in Stanford, and she also was president of the Connecticut Wilton League of Voters and the national president of League of Women Voters. Kay? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I like the brevity of all of that. And could I just, it was lovely to have the applause, but just one note, please. No applause or anything during the course of the debate, only because it just takes time away from hearing from the candidates. So if you wouldn't mind waiting until the conclusion of the debate to express your opinions, that would be much appreciated by me and by the candidates. So I want to welcome everyone. Obviously, our purpose this evening is to provide you with an opportunity to hear the candidates' views on the issues that are facing Wilton. Now, this first debate is among the 3 candidates for the Board of Selectmen, 2 of whom will be elected. The second debate will be among the 4 candidates for the Board of Finance, 3 of whom will be elected. Now, this format is designed to allow the candidates time to discuss the issues. The only rule is that the total time used by each candidate by the conclusion of the debate be approximately the same. The questions have come from the public, both prior to the debate and from those individuals here in person this evening. The candidates are not restricted to 1 or 2 minute responses. Instead, they can spend as little or as much time as they feel is appropriate, within reason, to discuss each issue. Our goal is to encourage debate. The candidates will take turns being the first to respond to a question, and following the question period, each one will make a 2-minute closing statement. Members of the League of Women Voters are serving as timers for the debate, and they will keep the candidates and me informed of the time that's been expended. So if a serious imbalance in time used occurs during the course of the debate, I will call it to their attention and see that it's corrected. And so it's now my pleasure to introduce the candidates for the Board of Selectmen. To my far right is Andrew Warren, Republican. To his left is David Tadco, reading my numbers, Democrat David Tadco, and last but not least, Democrat Rich McCarty. And so now to the debate, and the first candidate to respond will be Mr. Warren. And the first question is, what can be done to make the Board of Selectmen work as a more cohesive board with specific examples to secure Wilton's future? There has been public tension among Board of Selectmen members. How will you rebuild trust in the Board of Selectmen? And again, the first is Mr. Warren.
That's a great question. It's kind of 2 parts. You ask kind of how they can better work together, but also how things might be done going forward. And the topics that the board deals with, people are very passionate about them, and they have strong feelings, which is good. Debate is positive. Sometimes, my personal view, I think sometimes discussion is not intentionally, but maybe it doesn't get the discussion that it deserves because people are worried about needing to get along and needing to appear cohesive, where I believe that challenging each other, and I mean that in certainly a respectful sense, but having lively debate, if you will, is important in being able to resolve differences, agree to disagree where you might need to, and come to some resolution that everybody can get behind and support. Not everything is going to be a 5-0 vote. That's just not the way life works, and it shouldn't. If everybody's doing the same thing, then the question is, are we really getting enough views? And so I think it's important to have those those views and to have that discussion. There's some very specific issues that have come up with the Board of Selectmen in the recent past, so I don't want to comment necessarily how I would address those because those are different, but I think how I would address things going forward is just ensuring that we do have adequate time for debate, that we are properly prepared for the meetings, materials are provided, topics are discussed on the agenda prior to the Board of Selectmen so that they can have a robust and open discussion and understand that not everybody's going to have the same opinion.
Mr. Tatko, same question.
Thank you very much. So I would concur that I do think that some degree of constructive tension is productive in these boards. There's a reason there are 5 members of the board. Obviously, we're not all going to agree on things, and hopefully, with different views expressed, we do come to the best outcome for everybody. I would say a few things. The topic of surprises and expectations is one that seems to have come up on the board. So, exactly what's going to be presented, what is available to be discussed on that day versus not available to be discussed on that day. Have all the members of the board had the time to review all the relevant information and review the decisions that are going to be faced by them on that particular day? There were some specifics over the course of the past year relating to the budget back in the spring that I believe was presented later than some members were expecting. There were disagreements over hiring processes. There was obviously a very strong disagreement about when one member of the board moved from Wilton and how that would be handled.
I've been on the Board of Selectmen since August of this year. Better.
Yes.
I've been on the Board of Selectmen since August of this year, and I've witnessed firsthand the deliberations and the discussion that takes place at the board. And I fully support strong and robust discussion at these meetings. And I sit there with my colleague, Ross Tortel, and we watch that discussion and jump in when appropriate. I think at times the conversation and the discussion is not constructive. I think we need to foster a better atmosphere of constructive discussion to move items along to a timely resolution. I too agree, all items don't have to be a 5-0 vote. My appointment to the board was 3-2. So all items, while you might strive for unanimity among the board, it is not required. On the several commissions and committees and boards that I've been on in my 30 years of living in town, members of the board, but for you, the people who have put us on the boards in the first instance. And I think it gives the boards a chance to hear the issues and to discuss the differences and to address what's in the best interests of the community.
Any other comment on that question? All right. Next question, Mr. Tatko, you're the first to respond. The police headquarters has faced building delays, early on contingency questions, and limited updates. How can overall capital oversight on town projects be fixed?
So on big projects such as these, I think it's very important to have a strong, to get good feedback from the experts of the matter, whether it's architects, whether it's engineers, whether it's environmental studies that have to happen as it relates to traffic flows, ingress, egress. I think those things really need to be very carefully planned in advance. And for each of those separate tracks, there need to be milestones set, milestones as it relates to time, milestones as it relates to cost, and there needs to be an organized approach in the meetings to make sure that all those milestones are reviewed with the appropriate individuals at the right intervals that are agreed to in advance. And to the degree that individual milestones are missed, again, either on time or on cost, that needs to be discussed with the relevant expert, and a reevaluation needs to be made on either one of those variables to see if either one of those variables might need to be adjusted over the longer term. So I think it really comes down to organization, it comes down to discipline, it comes down to clear communications, it comes down to making sure that everyone on the board is apprised of where things are at so that they can appropriately chime in and contribute productively to the conversation. And hopefully if we do those things and hit those milestones, we can avoid a similar kind of delay that we saw and are seeing right now.
Mr. McCarty?
Police headquarters, to me, is just an example of some of the failed policies that we've seen in the last 8 to 10 years in town. There's been an effort in town hall to consolidate jobs, to have people doing more than one job at a time. And this includes DPW, and this includes how our building processes are being managed and overseen. I think we need to bring a more professional view as to how things need to be managed in town. One of the things I did in my last 7 years of my legal career was I oversaw real estate management and real estate sales for the company I worked for in Stanford. I oversaw the sale of 600 Washington Boulevard, and then I oversaw the rental of our space back in that building. What I've seen in town is we have building managers, Jones, Lang, LaSalle, Cushman, Wakefield. I think we need to engage professionals who know how to manage properties, who know how to manage construction, and who know how to make the steps happen along the way so that a project that was priced out at $16 million doesn't come in at $19 million.
Mr. Warren?
I would agree with everything that's been said. I would, I guess, summarize it to say I believe a professional should be utilized to manage the construction of something like the police headquarters. I think just putting the expertise aside, just the capacity. If we have a town employee that has capacity to manage a large project like the police headquarters, then the question is, well, what are they doing the rest of the time? Because we're only building it for a year and a half or whatever it is. So I think it's important to hire a professional construction manager. I think the cost the benefit far outweighs the cost of that. I think that there are other projects in town that are perfectly fine to be managed by the town, but I think something large like the police headquarters, given the significance of it, we should utilize a third-party expert.
Any other comment on that question?
Nope.
All right, next question, Mr. McCarty, you're first to respond. How would you plan to increase community involvement in the future of the town of Wilton?
That is something that I have focused on in my 2+ months now on the Board of Selectmen. We have had opportunities to increase involvement in our activities. On the CFO search committee and on the town administrative search committee, we were told that they didn't meet the requirements for actual notices and the minutes of meetings. That's just wrong way to proceed. I suggested when that was announced that we should open these meetings to the people and make sure the people know what's going on. There hasn't been a notice about any of those meetings for these two important positions in town. I also think we need to get other boards and committees in town to get away from the veil of Zoom. Zoom, I don't think, is an effective way to hear what the community desires from our various committees, boards, and other committees. It's important that we open up our committee discussions to in-person meetings. I think most people know the importance of at least one committee in town that is only being conducted by Zoom. I think the important issues that are being addressed by our committees need to be held in public and give the public an opportunity to appear before those meetings so that the committee members themselves can hear and understand what the people in town are thinking and what their views are in a face-to-face forum.
Mr. Moore?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, it's great to see this many people here because actually just getting people to vote is very difficult, as you all probably know. I mean, in our municipal elections, I think last time it was like 15% showed up. So if we take a look at all these issues we're talking about that are very important, that you all are here to hear our views, to vote. And you talk to people, go out everywhere, but then people don't vote. And so what happens is the decisions are made by a small group of people, not necessarily the people who are most passionate or the largest group. So I think we need to do a better job at outreach. There's a lot of different ways to do that. I think more communication with the town, something like quarterly town halls or annual town halls, something to help try to increase engagement. I think communication from the town can be improved quite significantly. I think some of the upgrades to the websites, the website is very clunky, it's very difficult to use. We're all on our phones all the time. We have an app for everything else. There's town apps. The town of Rye has an app that they use. They're low cost. They're great. All the tools, all the communication, and all the things in one place. There's a lot of different things you can do. I do agree with Zoom, although I do believe that the Zoom should be an option for people because many people, especially younger people or younger with families, things they simply can't just leave and join a meeting at 7 o'clock, but they may be able to join Zoom. I do believe it's important to have the in-person meetings, but have a Zoom option available for people to participate and provide their comments. I think the town does a lot of great things with the Chamber of Commerce and all the things that are done in Town Center, the Farmers Market, all those things to bring people together. I love walking my dog on the weekends by Rise. Everybody goes to Rise Donuts, walks their dogs. I mean, it's amazing to see all the kids out there. It's great. The more things we can do like that to bring people together, and hopefully we can all talk to people and get them involved, because as you all obviously know, because you're here, it's very important and it does result in change.
Mr. Kafka?
So I like using email communication. I've seen some more communications from the first selectman on different topics, just updates on various things going on around the town. And I think those have been good updates. I think some of the updates that come over email look a little formal, a little stiff, and maybe not the most enticing to open up. So maybe we can find some happy medium of email communication that looks inviting and gives individuals an idea of what are the topics that are being discussed, where can they give their input, how can they give their input. Other ways I can think of, perhaps promoting these decisions, perhaps promoting elections, promoting meetings through different affinity groups within the town is effective. I know on Monday that the PTAs, the school PTAs, are having a forum at Middlebrook, and I think it's fantastic that within their organization, they recognize the importance of the election and are organizing that event. And I can imagine that there may be other large organizations, maybe sports-related or religiously affiliated, that also could be perhaps good venues to advertise the events, to encourage members to come out and become more civically involved. The other very basic things, we obviously see the electronic signs on River Road and electronic signs on Route 7. Maybe more of that can go up, again, to remind people that an annual town meeting is going on. And lastly, on Zoom, I would concur that I think all boards should meet in person, but there should obviously be a Zoom option, and a Zoom option where the audio is clear. So I'll leave it at that.
Any other comment on that? Yes, go ahead.
One way of increasing participation or getting a better sense of what the community is thinking, I think, would be to invite people to focus groups. Open up a meeting date, send a notice out, come to 31 Comstock, and just sit down and talk to people about what's on their mind. I think you see focus groups in business, you see focus groups. I know my daughter-in-law is in the pasta business, and they do focus groups on products. And I think it is an effective way to find out what is on a person's mind and a community mind, and therefore help us focus more just on what is needed within the community.
Any other? Okay. Excuse me. Mr. Warren, your turn to be first, and this question is multiple parts to it. So if you need to repeat it, just say so. Given all the high-level departures in the last 2 years in the finance department of Town Hall, how will you help prevent that moving forward? And after multiple senior finance departures and an interim CFO, what concrete steps would you take in the next 6 to 12 months to try to stabilize staffing?
Well, if I could tell you how to prevent departures, I'd probably have a different profession and make a whole lot of money, because it's always an issue. Specific, obviously, to Wilton. There's a lot of underlying issues there, a lot of things that have gone on. Some are public, some probably aren't. I certainly don't know all of them. A couple of things I would say, just as a bit of an outsider's view. So I'm a CPA. I'm a partner in a CPA firm. I'm an auditor. I've been doing it for close to 30 years. So I deal with these type of issues on just about a daily basis. Having not had the privilege of having some of those discussions and talking to those people, looking again from my view, it appears that there are some dysfunctions within the department that need to be addressed. And I don't know if you all were able to listen to the report of the interim CFO last night, and I think he started to touch on some of those. When I look back at Dawn's departure and some of the things that she said that don't seem to align with what others said, and the question becomes, well, what is our performance review? Are these people being reviewed? What's the performance review? How can somebody have another job in another town and still be adequately supervised and reviewed locally and not know? And that's a big question. So I think there's questions with how the department is operating. And these are things that are big issues for the town, but they're common issues. Again, I deal with them on a daily basis. They're not unique, certainly, to Wilton. But they are issues. Things like staffing vacancies, I think it was for 18 months. That should never happen. There are companies who their sole purpose is to find people, right? There's recruiters, and they will find people. There's also temporary agencies. You can't have an empty spot with somebody with that critical in your accounting function, just not have them. So I don't know for sure what exactly happened. I'm not sure any of us do. So that's part of the question. How do we prevent it going forward? It's really taking a look at the entire department. So I think the roles and responsibility, the organization chart, who's reporting to who, what their functions are is critically important and needs to be really looked at and probably revised. Trying to not get into too many topics and watch my time, but again, when you look at some of the things that the CFO said, we're over 3 months past our year end. We don't have year end numbers. Well, how do we know what we're doing compared to our budget? How do we know? How can we understand how the town is operating if we don't even know what our year end numbers are 3 months ago? Because if we get them again in January or February of next year, they're stale. I mean, that's 8 months old at that point. We need relevant, current information. Anyway, so I think it's important to get it for the board to get involved and understand how this process is going to work very specifically and have specific performance goals and feedback to be able to measure it. And I think that kind of ties into how it would be prevented going forward, is ensuring that we have proper organization chart, lines of communication, performance reviews. I believe the CFO should have an executive session with the Board of Selectmen at regular times, as well as the auditors, to have an open discussion, open dialogue. That's oftentimes when personnel issues are brought to the table. And I think if we do those things, we can prevent what's happened going forward.
Mr. Tenko?
So very often, not always, but very often when an employee doesn't work out or a group of employees don't work out or there's turnover in an organization, it's often not the employee, but it's the construct. It's how the roles are set up. It's what's really expected of those employees. Is it clear that the employees know what's expected of them? And is the situation even winnable? Or it happens situations, people come into companies, come into organizations, and the situation is just such that it's just not going to be one that is going to be successful for them. So I do think we need to just review what are the responsibilities for the different roles. There's some conversations around, should we have a separate administrator from CFO? So I think making sure we know which roles we need, what are the responsibilities of those roles, how do those compare to peer towns of ours, how do our peer towns engage in those, and how do they operate to look for best practices. Then, are we sure that those individuals are being properly supported? Are they being supported on a technology basis? Are we using old systems? Are they hostage to maybe a former employee who left things in shambles and now things are a mess and it's just going to be too much for them to take over? Well, that's something we would need to know are they getting the proper support. Reviewing performance and having clear performance metrics and bogeys, of course, that's going to be important. And I think having clear conversations, candid conversations, not just with the people necessarily leading the departments, but perhaps even people working underneath. Sometimes you can get a better story of what's really going on within the group, talking to the junior person who's only been there a year or 2 years. They sometimes don't give you the polished response, and maybe not getting the polished response is what you really want to hear. So those are some of the things that I have in mind. Obviously, we need to be on the board to get into more of some of those intricacies. But hopefully, through sorting those things through, we can stabilize the department, build confidence, get through audits successfully, and really just build more confidence in what we can do in town hall from the town.
Mr. McCarthy?
One of the things that's easy to do is point out problems after problems after problems. I think one of the things that's important is that you find solutions. Because when you find solutions, you find other opportunities to move things forward. What I've seen at Town Hall, and what I heard last night at the Board of Finance meeting from the interim CFO, was that progress is being made within the operation, and that there were no glaring stop signs that he has found to this point. Now again, I've only come on in August, so I'm learning a little bit about it, and in fact it was the night I was appointed that Good Morning Wilton broke the story of Dawn working somewhere out of state. And you go back, and I had the opportunity to see the hiring letter for Dawn, and it gave her blank permission to work elsewhere at the same time. What kind of letter is that for an employee that's holding such a senior position in town? Granted, if you want to cooperate with other towns in the town from which she came, you need to properly limit that clause to restrict what she can do and require that the first selectman or the supervisor or first select person or the supervisor have the authority to approve or disapprove that other work. Watching late night TV and watching Board of Selectmen meetings, I found it curious over the course of a few months how she was always on Zoom with that blurred background, and she wasn't present. And after a while, when she wasn't present, you began to wonder, where is she? So one of the things I also think about, part of that question was retaining employees in town hall. We need to create a better atmosphere and working conditions for people in town hall. I've already heard stories that people are bringing in their space heaters into their offices in town hall. Why is that? Is that how you keep employees? Is that how you make a good work environment? We all know that in various departments, plastic is put up over windows in town hall. That's not an acceptable work environment. That's not a place people enjoy coming to work. We only know people in the winter were wearing coats in town hall. Is that an acceptable work environment? I know my wife jokes that I keep the heat so low that I have to wear a coat at home, but that's not today's discussion. She's laughing at it. I think we need to find ways, and part of the capital plan review, and for buildings and structures in town, is to create a good work environment. And and that will keep and will also attract good employees. I think one of the things we need to look at as well is we have a lot of vacant office space in town. And maybe the time is coming where we should talk to our local real estate managers and landlords about the temporary placement of employees in other facilities. And the expense would be well worth it if we don't have to go through the search for a CFO or a town administrator or a controller again. So I think we need to be creative about it and find solutions. The suggestion that an executive session should be held with the CFO on a monthly basis to hear what's going on is not what I would think is necessary. I think we need to have an open discussion with the CFO so everyone can understand what's going on in finance and the progress that is very, very much being made in terms of the condition of our finance staff.
Any other comment on that question?
Yeah, I'd just like to make a comment to clarify the executive session. So we would disagree on that point. I will say, as a part of good corporate governance, in almost every single audit committee meeting that I am in, there's an executive session with finance. And the purpose of that is to have an open dialogue. And it's the reason why it's in executive sessions, the thought that people will be more just open and have a general discussion. And it's something like, hey, how's it going? How's this doing? It's not formal, it's not on the record. I think if you look at the rules for corporate governance, it's something that's suggested to have executive sessions with the CFO, and I think it's something that's critically important. Similar with the auditors, right? From an auditor standpoint, it's almost always happens in executive session with the auditors, and I'm not sure that's happening with the town. It needs to. As an auditor, I would never have a client and not have an executive session with the board. I think it's critically important to allow for the free flow of communications and to provide a better understanding.
I would agree with Rich as well on the renovation of Town Hall. It's beyond the symbolic part of it. We should be proud of our Town Hall. Just creating a proper work environment for employees. Again, to the point that it's often not the employee, it's the environment that they come into. And if they have to be in an environment where they're uncomfortable, it inadvertently sends a message. It goes beyond superficiality. It inadvertently sends a message that we should not be sending to employees of Wilton. So I would certainly advocate for thinking about what capital costs might be needed and perhaps wrapping that into the committee that is looking at capital costs across the town as a way to improve it. And I also like the idea of potentially looking at other properties, other office properties that are being underutilized right now, because it is not, my understanding is it's not just about the conditions and windows that aren't sealing properly, it's just about space, that multiple people are being crammed into rooms, which is not ideal. And if we have unused office space in town, that would be a way on a solid cost basis to create that working space for them.
Anything else?
I would agree with that as well. I won't go into that topic necessarily, but I do agree with that.
All right. Next question, and Mr. Katko, you're first to respond. What would you like to see in the next plan of conservation and development?
I like many of the aspects of the 2019 Plan of Conservation Development. Some of the things that certainly I think the town needs to think about the burden, the economic burden that's being put on homeowners relative to the commercial base of the town. And so I do think we need to thoughtfully develop, and I hope that the next Plan of Conservation Development addresses ways that we can thoughtfully develop. So, within the Wilton Town Center, that's the area where, on a per square foot basis, the town can generate the most tax revenue. I would hope that we can, within that Plan of Conservation Development, find a way to attract more consistent businesses to come to the town center. One of the things that was mentioned in the last one that I hope we can further build on is perhaps a way to get some of the traffic that's coming down Route 7. We have high volume of traffic coming through down Route 7 that maybe originally was not planning on stopping within Wilton, but they go right past our town center, often having no idea that there is a town center nearby. So is there a way that maybe we can make signs or sidewalks or landscape in a certain way that invites those people to come and potentially spend money and increase traffic in the town center so that we can have more restaurants and stores? Beyond that, other things that I hope maybe we could consider, maybe some more mixed-use residential, commercial development, again to appropriately build and appropriately grow the town, grow residents in the town, but also invite businesses to be close by to those residents so that those establishments are well supported. The last POCD talked about creating building up residents along transit-oriented corridors. I think that's an area that we can hope to further develop. people that commute either to Stamford or people that commute to New York City are likely to want to be around those transit-oriented corridors. So is there a way that we can increase, develop there in an area which already has a good bit of traffic, doesn't change the character of other parts of the town, and really can create that extra tax base that we need here in the town. And then lastly, just looking at the physical environment of the town, I hope we can continue to build trails. I know the Norwalk River Valley Trail was really key during the pandemic, and it showed how important that was. Other things that were suggested in the past, things like a river walk, that's something that I know it's been talked about for a very long time. I would love to see that be developed and part of that plan. And then lastly, athletic facilities. We have a very high participation in the town, particularly from young families in athletics. We all, I know we all agree that education is clearly very important in the town. I view athletics as a very important extracurricular addendum to athletics. We've identified needs to invest in our schools, which obviously is critically important, but I would say the need to invest in fields, turf fields, lighted fields, creating additional fields, creating facilities for players. I think those are things that parents of the town, and I have 2 kids myself who are travel soccer players within Wilton. I know we and many of the other parents of our teammates would appreciate those as well. So again, I think it's just thinking about what that residential mix is. How do we enhance further feed into and enhance the environment that we're fortunate to have here in Wilton, and then improve some of the specific facilities that, or infrastructure that all the town can benefit from and use.
Mr. McCarty?
I just want to start and say how disappointed I was last night in reading how the lighting for the Whitten Field was disapproved because it violated one of the P&Z, I guess, one of the regulations in town. I think there's already a lot of lighting towers around Whitten Field athletic facility. I think it's already concentrated there. And I think to make better use, more complete use of those facilities, we need to find a way to get those lighting towers approved. It's in an area where there already are lighting towers. I agree that the plan of conservation and development should focus on town center. We need to have a town center that attracts people to our businesses, to enable businesses to succeed, that attracts people to our restaurants, to enable those restaurants to succeed. In talking to ownership at some of my favorite restaurants in town, they talk about the difficulty in providing, outdoor seating. They talk about the difficulty in providing views from their other places that have outdoor seating, and providing their views to the natural environment around them. I think we need to facilitate through the plan of conservation and development, business development as well. Where I live in town, I have one of the paths that goes basically through my backyard in many respects, down from School Road down to Merwin Meadows. And it's a beautiful facility. We see people, we see the campers from the day camp going down that path to Merwin Meadows each summer to go swimming. Well, maybe not this summer if you didn't go swimming. I don't know why we didn't get that fixed in time, but it is an important resource to consider, the natural environment in which we live. How do we attract businesses? There are ways we should be employing to meet with chambers of commerce, to meet with developers, and try to figure out how we can occupy these buildings. How many times do you just go to New Canaan to walk on the business street, stick your head in a store, buy something, go to J. Crew, go to one of the restaurants along there. It's a place to go, a place to hang out. We have our donuts, we have our village market, but it's really hard to see where people can come to Wilton to walk around and spend money and enjoy a downtown. I think the plan of conservation and development needs to focus on that kind of development.
Mr. Warren?
A couple of things. I guess in a broader sense, I would say, when you read the plan of conservation and development, particularly from 2019, there's a lot of great things in there. So why haven't we done it? That's the issue. They're just not done. There's a lot of great things. If you've read it, a lot of people read it, oh, this is great, but nothing's happening, and that's what needs to change. I'm on the Economic Development Commission. We had done a survey to local businesses, and as usual, what came up is visibility of town center. It's something that we focused on. We've done a sign study. We have a proposal now that's going to be presented to the Board of Selectmen to provide signs on Route 7, some of the other entrances to town center. The difficulty is that they're state roads, so it has to go through the State Department of Transportation. There's safety issues. There's a lot of bureaucracy, as you might guess. But if you look at the Economic Development Commission's minutes, you'll see the example in there, an example of the sign that we're proposing. So we are trying to do those things, because I agree the importance of town center, getting more traffic to town center is important. In terms of the sports, I wholeheartedly agree with everything that was said. And quite frankly, I was passionate about it before last night in the article from Good Morning Wilton on the lights this morning. It's actually in my op-ed that's coming out on October 20th, the importance of the sports field. I submitted it on Monday. But I agree with all this. I mean, the lighting's obvious, and I truly feel that it just has to get done through planning and zoning now, through a text amendment, but it has to be done. There's no reason for it not to be done. And it was interesting because when I read the article from Good Morning Wilton, I thought, well, I'm just going to look and see what the history is. Wow, almost 2 years ago, same month, same issue, there was $500,000 reallocated from the Middlebrook fields to the lighting at Whitten Field. What's happened? Nothing. 2 years of back and forth and some very, very unhappy people, a lot of unhappy athletes. So I think that in particular needs to be focused on it. I agree with the sports field. The bubble failed. The bubble, I think there's a lot of angst over that. I think that's something that could be revisited. When I look at just talking to people in the town, somebody, I don't know, a while ago had posted something on Facebook. What do you like about Wilton? Sports, Ambler Farm, and education. And they're right. Those are, when you talk to people, those are the three things. And sports is so important for so many reasons beyond just the sport itself, the camaraderie, the things that you learn, being an athlete and going to school, and all those things are very important. And I think they're beneficial. We talk about trying to attract younger people, keep young people, young families, affordability in Wilton. That's what they want. When you look at it going to the town meeting this past year, we approved $700,000 for the new turf field. If you look at the voting on those, the highest yes votes was for the sports field, by kind of far. The second highest was Ambler Farm, and the others were quite a bit lower. So it's clear that it's very important to people, and it's something that I think the town needs to focus on.
Yes.
I'm going to focus on two words: not done. There are many things in town that get approved and they just don't get done. Whether it's the turf field, whether it's Ambler Farm. For anyone who went to the town meeting and saw the unbridled, no pun intended for the farm, the unanimous support for Ambler Farm, and to still have the lease, being called a lease through a more property management agreement with the Friends of Ambler Farm, muddling along, and to me, is almost unforgivable in certain ways. Because Ambler Farm is one of the biggest assets that we have in town, and we need to move that forward. In addition, there's the issue of the so-called yellow house at Ambler Farm. It's been before the Capital Planning Committee, and at that meeting, the chair of that committee talked about the terrible condition that that house is in. If we were to fix that house, even if we bond money to fix that house, the rent from renting that house to an occupant can more than cover the charge. Let's get away from not done, and let's get more moving forward to get things done.
All right, Mr. McCarty, you're first to answer this next question, and since you mentioned Ambler Farm, The question is, what can you do to finally put in place a proper legal document or lease or management to give Friends of Ambler Farm the legal footing they need to operate effectively?
This will be a short answer. Complete the operating agreement. We need to get that operating agreement done. If it calls for a session of the Board of Selectmen, a special session of the Board of Selectmen, a special meeting, and the difference between a special meeting and a regular meeting, and it's not part of the regular scheduled meetings, and you can just come and give notice. We've done that not infrequently. And get everyone in the room and invite the public to come as well. And let's hash out the final terms of that agreement so we can have a document in place that brings certainty to the operation and direction of Ambler Farm going forward.
Mr. Warren?
Yeah, Ambler Farm it's a town treasure, right? Everybody loves Ambler Farm. It's great. To be very clear, I fully support it. I fully support funding Ambler Farm to the extent we're required to, and potentially more if that's what people want to do. It's a great asset. I love it. That said, we can't lose sight of fiscal responsibility and ensuring that we are remaining fiscally responsive. And I wasn't involved in the lease negotiations or drafting of the original lease. Part of the issue is ensuring that the town is only obligated to what they're required to be obligated for. That doesn't mean that the town can't approve more, but when I think about obligating the town, and initially I think the initial lease was like for 10 years and 8 10-year leases or something, so 80 or 90 years. We need to make sure that we're only obligating ourselves to what we're required to. For example, the yellow house, it's a great point. The yellow house is not required to be maintained by the town, according to the deed. There's the main house and the carriage barn, and I think the cow barn it's referred to. Doesn't mean I don't support revising the yellow house, but when we talk about a lease and what we're required to do, we need to be very specific and fiscally responsible, understanding what we're required to do and what we want to do. And if we want to do more, I think, because it could be significant dollars, it should be voted on. My guess is it'll pass, but I think that's the process that it should go through. I agree with Rick, just get it done. It just needs to get done, for sure. All these things can be worked out. I think the town allocates roughly $75,000 in their annual budget to support it. Let's look at what's in the lease. Is that what's more than what's required by the lease? If not, let's figure that out and let's resolve it, because I think everybody supports Ambler Farm and wants it to continue to be the great asset it is. We just need to get it done.
Mr. Packer?
So I was at the town meeting last year, and also, like Rich, was very moved by the impassioned pleas that the town support the work of Ambler Farm. And I agree with both candidates on stage here that we absolutely need to find a way to get this done. In my view, if we view this as an asset to the town that I think the residents do, we need to be ready as a town to stand behind it, stand behind renovations, stand behind ongoing maintenance. And we also need to recognize that we have a strong operating partner right now with the Friends of Ambler Farm, and to view the agreement as more of a management agreement. Obviously, we will lay out terms within the agreement. It's not a total free rein, but I would be concerned about looking to squeeze out every penny from the Friends. I view the farm as an asset that brings people to Wilton, and that's something that I think as Wilton we need more of. We need more attractions that say, why should I be going to Wilton? Why should I bring my family to Wilton? And having a well-maintained operating farm with all the facilities renovated and modern makes it that, and that there are benefits that the town gets that go above and beyond near-term maintenance costs. So yes, we should think through, make sure we have the engineering studies to know what the potential risks are long-term, what could we potentially be on the hook for longer term, but I do think we should bond if need be to bring things up to code and just build an agreement with the Friends of Ambler Farm that I think is appropriate for them as a nonprofit, knowing that it will serve us very well in the long term.
something that was stated in some of the comments just now was how much it would cost to do something. I think what we can't lose sight of, and what hasn't been mentioned yet tonight, is the 150, or is it 140, or is it 130 million dollars worth of infrastructure repairs that are hanging over our budget process and our progress going forward. I think we have to find a way to solve that 150, 140, 130. The last number I saw published was 150 in Good Morning Wilton, about how to solve that problem. We need to figure that out because it will overhang all of our decisions on budgets in the next 5 or 10 years. I was pleased yesterday to see the great work at Middlebrook School about the lockers, floors, and ceiling tiles, where through the efforts of our local DPW folks and the direction of carpenters, we saved so much money that they can now move down the hallway. I think we need to figure out that 150 million before we can progress with many new items so that we can be assured that we can afford the items as we go forward. I've had conversations with people who have been part of finance in town in the last 6 months, those conversations in the last 6 months. And, I asked them flat out, over the last 8 years or so, have we been too fiscally conservative in town? They don't really want to answer the question yes, but they said yes.
Go ahead. This term fiscal responsibility gets brought up over and over. Very often fiscal responsibility means going with the lowest cost option, but not always. Sometimes what's fiscally responsible is to invest. Perhaps that's maybe not the nearest term politically expedient thing to do, but the long-term prudent thing to do is to invest so that we don't end up with these capital costs that shocked us 2 years ago. So I just want to clarify that. That's something from my view, as I think of fiscal responsibility, I think we should consider it and make sure to view as important as it is.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point, and I would agree with that. One thing I would point out in terms of this future debt is, it's very important. I agree with it, and we need to address it, but we also need to keep it in perspective. I think right now the town has roughly 64 million in debt, 10 million that's been authorized, I think, but not bonded, and that debt gets paid down. So if you look at the presentation, I believe it was last night that was done to the Board of Finance, it shows the debt payout. It shows that about somewhere between 100 to 130 million plus can be supported over the next 18 to 20 years with the payoff of the past debt. So obviously as our debt service goes down, we get new debt. It doesn't really change what our budget is, what our payment, our principal, and our interest. So it's a big number, but it's very doable in the due course as we've been planning. But it's important that we focus on those facilities and what those costs are, because I agree, fiscally conservative doesn't mean not spending the money, it means spending the money right. So if it's for the maintenance, we have Gilbert and Bennett building, the maintenance wasn't done, a lot of issues there that hopefully or potentially could have been prevented by maintenance and spending the money. So yeah, I totally agree, being fiscally conservative doesn't mean not spending the money, it just means spending it smart.
Any other comment there? Because we've just got a couple of minutes before it's time for closing statements. Okay. Well, since there's no other question that could be answered in 30 seconds by each of the candidates, we'll turn to our closing statements. I ask the timers to clear their, I still say stopwatches, they're obviously using their phones, not stopwatches anymore. Let me know when you're all set. Okay, and the first to offer a 2-minute closing is Mr. Warren.
All right, so, in summary, I would say, again, given my background, I've been in public accounting, I've been an auditor for 30 years. I deal with financial issues, budgeting, personnel issues, both at my firm and at clients on a daily basis. So they're nothing new, but they're very significant issues and they're very important, and I think I'm well served well suited to help address those issues. I've heard a lot from both the other candidates, and quite frankly, I agree with everything for the most part. And that's a good thing. I think the question is, who's best served to go about and get these things done? And that's the big question, and quite frankly, I don't know them all personally, so I'm not going to tell you all the personal reasons why I think they can't get it done, other than to say, I know myself, and I know what I've done in the past, and I know I can get it done. My focus is getting things done. I'm a firm believer that more is lost by indecision than wrong decision. That doesn't mean you make rash decisions, but means you need to make decisions and move things forward. And if I'm lucky enough to be elected, that's exactly what I'll do.
You still have another 60 seconds.
Oh, okay.
If you have something more to say.
Well, I could go on and talk about myself, but truthfully though, all these things we're talking about, I've gone back and looked. So we talked about town center, and I went back and looked. There's history of all this stuff. Somebody proposed putting a Ferris wheel in town, which I thought would have been great. They proposed putting flags. There's all these things similar to looking back at the lighting issue. Most of these things are not new. If you go back and look and do your research, they're there. They're talked about, and it's very frustrating. They're the housing authorities. And you go back and you read the minutes, they evaluate the Gilbert Bennett, they do all these things, and it dies. That's it. It's gone. We move on to something else. And if I'm elected, I'll ensure that for our majority of our priority projects, they will get done.
Thank you. That is your 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Tacko, 2 minutes.
Great. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming tonight, being part of the local civic democratic process within Wilton. It's very important at the local level that everyone gets involved. So I moved to Wilton 11 years ago with my wife and baby at the time. We didn't have a whole lot of time to really understand the character at the time when we were deciding on buying the house, but feel very glad years later, and I'm very happy we made the decision to come here. And it's been great being a resident here, but now I see an opportunity to contribute in the role of Board of Selectmen. Recent months, we've seen the unexpected turnover, we've seen the bizarre circumstances around the departure of the CFO, and then more importantly, we've seen the long-term questions about the development of the town and capital costs that the town is going to have to bear. It's for all these reasons that I think the Board of Selectmen needs an organized, technically competent Board of Selectmen able to handle these decisions which are going to impact the town over the longer term. I believe my background in due diligence has put me in a good position to process information, sometimes too much information, sometimes too little information, to ask the right questions, to trust but verify, to approach it all with a dispassionate intensity, never getting too excited or swept away by an idea, really making sure to approach everything rationally and calmly to make the best decision in the long term. The other part of the role of Board of Selectmen I think is very important is to have a long-term vision. My background in investment research is one where you don't know how an investment's ultimately going to turn out. You can have an idea for what the potential upside is. You can have an idea for what the risks might be. You can have an idea of how it might be better or worse than another one. But it's really about thinking about that vision for the long term, and that's something that we need to keep developing as a town. Some of the things we can think about as a town, I mentioned perhaps mixed-use development projects. Maybe a public-private partnership could make sense for the town. What can we do with our physical assets to drive businesses to the town center? And then again, approaching nature, approaching the natural beauty we have in the town to really embrace where we are here in Wilton. There's a lot to consider here. I hope everyone will come and support me on November 4th. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Mr. McCarty, your 2 minutes.
Of course, thank you all for coming tonight. My background in as corporate counsel for insurance and financial services companies has taught me well the value of process and controls. I think we need enhanced process and controls around the way we run town hall, not just in finance, but in the experiment with a shared job of a tax assessor and a tax collector. That doesn't work. I think we need to take a look at all of that as part of the process and control study that's ongoing. I've lived in town for 30 years, put the kids through the Wilton school system. The Wilton school system is the #1 priority for me in this town. As we solve our challenges with regard to finance and payment of past inadequacies, we need to keep our schools #1. It's so wonderful tonight to see so many friends and neighbors here tonight, people that I've known so long come out and attend these meetings. And it's so good when people are engaged in what is important to them. And
You need to be engaged, not just about today, but for our future. Leaders have a vision of today, but they also have a vision into the future. And I think I can help this town move forward to its future. You may be familiar with how I got appointed to the board, but whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, an independent or unaffiliated, we all care deeply about this town and want to see it succeed. My pledge to you is to find common ground by fostering bipartisan unity. I will seek greater transparency in our boards and committees. Recently, a close friend returned to Wilton after not living here for almost 10 years. And as we were going to dinner, they said, you know, Wilton has changed, but it still feels the same. I think we need to make sure that as we move forward, we keep that Wilton feeling in what we do. Thank you for your support.
And you may now all applaud to your marquee guest. And so if I could ask the candidates for the Board of Finance to come on up and be seated, we will start the second debate as quickly as we can. Taking your seats. Look, one of our top, she's bringing it. And then if you want to shut those doors.
You got it.
If I could ask the doors to be closed, period. Hello in the doorway. Thank you. You just close the doors. Thank you. All right. Welcome to our second debate of the evening. It will be run in the same way as the first one was. Thank you all for coming this evening, and thank you, candidates, for your willingness to participate. So let me introduce the four candidates for the Board of Finance. To my far right is Democrat Kari Roberts. To her left is Democrat Eric Fenwick. To his left is Republican Kim Healy. And to her left is Republican Matt Ramage. And now to the debate, and the first candidate to respond to the first question will be Ms. Roberts. And the question is, local headlines have highlighted a number of financial, accounting, procedural, and legal issues in our town government. How do you make sure we don't have a repeat of these issues, and that we get Wilton on a better path going forward? Ms. Roberts.
Okay, I wanted to thank everyone for coming tonight. And
Do pull the microphone closer to you. You do have to have it close.
Sorry, is that working?
That's better. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you everybody for coming tonight. I appreciate it, your time. And I guess upon reading everything in Good Morning Wilton and going back and looking at historic pieces and stuff like that, to me it seems like the number one glaring issue with what happened at Town Hall is a complete lack of supervision and oversight. It seems like there were org charts going way back when that laid out who was responsible for what, and it seems like it was structured well, and it kind of, I don't know, people didn't pay attention, I guess. So for me, I worked 21 years on Wall Street, and I was responsible for closing large $100 million and multi-billion-dollar deals, transactions, and my strength was in getting the job done. And we would have time and responsibility, documents pages long, and to have something slip through the cracks the way these things have recently, to me is very shocking. There's no other way to put it. And so how I would address that is I think I would attempt to have better lines of communication, better supervision. There needs to be, there were clear lines of reporting, but it seems like they weren't followed and nobody was paying attention, really, sort of. So I guess what I would do, again, is to the extent the charter allows it, that I would insert myself in the process and expect much more communication, regular updates, and also I'm a firm believer in liking who you work with. So you're working with these people. How's it going? What's new? Where's the problems? Getting feedback. But it just seems like there was a complete, vacuum of oversight. So I would do everything in my power to remedy that. And again, I made a career off of doing that, so I think I'd be very good at it.
Mr. Fanman?
It was a mega disaster, it was a fiasco. But I'm going to take a slightly different position. The Board of Finance has a very tough job, and it's done by 5 volunteers. They spend a lot of time going through the budget, about $145 million, making sure we're fiscally responsible, setting guidelines. I don't think it's the Board of Finance's bandwidth to supervise day-to-day the employees of the town. We have a reporting structure. Maybe the Board of Finance people should say, hey, our CFO is always on Zoom, why is that? But again, if we are going to have lanes, and we stick to our lanes and stick to our responsibilities, at the end of the day, it wasn't the Board of Finance that messed this up. So, that's pretty much all I have to say on that.
Okay. Ms. Healy?
So, I actually was going to start with that as well, so I won't finish that. But I will tell you, as a member of the Board of Selectmen these last 4 years, I am also shocked by what has happened this last year. From the Board of Selectmen's perspective, we do not manage the day-to-day operations of Town Hall either. But we do have tools in the toolbox through the charter that could have been used to help the process along and bring more transparency to the public. I attempted to do that, as you all know. I'm sure you've read about me a lot in Good Morning Wilton, and not because I chose to do it or because I wanted to do it, but because it's required and it's necessary that you understand what's going on. Did we always get it right? Did I always get it right? No. And did you always get all the information either? But from the Board of Finance's perspective, one of the biggest issues is we have a material weakness in our audit. Now, the Board of Finance does supervise and manage the audit process, and we can do a better job with that moving forward. We can engage the auditors more. We can continue on with the process review that we were going to start, and then we lost our CFO. Tagging back to the CFO being on Zoom, there's a lot of meetings at night. So for her to be on Zoom was not unreasonable. She started her day very early when she was in person. What has transpired over the last year, there were some personal issues which brought her away from the office, and she was permitted to work remotely, just so you know. It wasn't a lack of oversight on our part at the time. But we meet twice a month, and as she proceeded to be away, obviously we became more concerned, and then obviously the news hit, and we were informed. I think at the previous debate mentioned, we were literally at a Board of Selectmen meeting and the news dropped. So the Board of Finance can use the powers that it has to help the budgeting process along. We can help with the reporting, and we can certainly help with the process review and the audit committee.
Mr. Ramani?
My name is Matt Ramani. I'm currently the chair of the Board of Finance. And so as I think about the different action items which have happened in Town Hall, specifically in the Finance Department,